A friend of mine recently offered to let me borrow his Porsche 911 Turbo for a video review on my channel. Most people would jump at that opportunity, but I was a little hesitant. Not because I didn't think it would be good or because I'm above it, but because I thought it would be so good I might try and sell everything to try and buy one. So on this episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, you guys are going to find out if all of my possessions are for sale. Welcome everyone to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, and boy is this going to be a good one. A car that needs absolutely no introduction, the 991 911 Turbo. I've owned a 911, I had a 997 generation, but I've never driven a turbo version, and this is the later generation obviously. First of all, huge thank you to my friend Matt for letting me borrow his car for a couple days. He owns a shop called No Limit 513, so check them out. They do a bunch of things, but they do body work and stuff like that. So check them out if you're in the Cincinnati area. I have to shout him out for letting me borrow his wonderful car. So much to talk about with this thing. I'm super excited. I'm super stoked. It's been awesome to be able to drive this the last 2 days. And this is my review. This is my summary of what I think of the 991.1 Turbo. And we're going to start off with something that you probably weren't expecting. A left 90-degree turn, which doesn't seem like a big deal, right? But the first thing I noticed with this car, before the engine, like the power, of course, like all that stuff, but even when you're just pulling out of like a parking lot, the rear steer is very apparent in this car. And we're going to hustle this here in a minute, but I want to talk about the rear steer here for a second because it is so magic. There's some like engineering nuance to it. I say nuance because the wheels don't turn in the same direction all the time. If you're going low speed, in order to make you kind of like do a quicker U-turn or like turn quicker, the wheels will turn in the opposite direction. So you sort of have this pivot sensation. But when you're higher speed, I forget what the number is. I think it's above 30 miles an hour or something like that. The wheels will turn in the same direction as you. So it kind of gives you more of stability sort of in the corner. And it just really makes for a very interesting feeling overall, especially at low speeds. You really feel it. And it comes in handy just doing day-to-day things that you would do in, say this was your daily driver, going to the shops or whatever. And I say that like, you know, a lot of people use this for a daily driver, but we will get to that because that's one of the things that I love about this car is that it does absolutely everything. But that little stuff aside, I'm going into manual mode. This road has some debris, so I'm not gonna, unfortunately, hustle it as much as I normally would. And also, this isn't my car. Let's talk about, of course, the engine. 3.8 liter, twin turbo, flat six, and there's no place that this engine doesn't make power. It is mind-boggling. I'm gonna get on it here. I'm gonna put my head back because I learned that lesson. Seriously, it warps your perception of reality. I'm not even joking. It's sort of, you know, GTRs and stuff do this. It has to be a rear-wheel drive car that does that because the only way you can sort of have those G-forces from a low speed is with all-wheel drive. I've owned a Mustang GT 350 that has 500 horsepower, but the fact that it's rear-wheel drive, like you can't quite put that power down the way you can in this car. And with these Cup 2s, this car is on Cup 2s, despite the fact that it's a little cold, it's still warm enough. And it's just mind-boggling. Like, the car makes 520 horsepower. This is the non-S version. This is, the S version makes 560. Let me tell you this point. Like, there are some niceties with the S that I would like to have, but I would be more than happy with this car because never at any point during the time I've driven this have I said, oh, you know what? I could really use more power because it's so effortless. The power is always there, and I think the mid-range is really where the meat is. There's a slight, like, I'm not even going to call it turbo lag. There is a slight delay at low RPM, but it spools up so quickly, you might as well not even be able to tell. And it's just an absolute weapon, as you would expect. Now, couple that with the PDK, and you guys have heard me talk about PDK before. I think it's the best automatic transmission you can buy, for sale, basically. And when I drove the 718 Cayman S, I said that the PDK is amazing. It's the best auto, but I still want a manual, especially in a Cayman. Like, I just want a manual. And for the most part, I would prefer a manual transmission in most cars. But I am changing my attitude on that. Let's give it a hit. Okay, that was 50% throttle because I'm trying to talk and think. So the problem with cars just getting so fast is that I don't want to leave the steering wheel with my hands. Like, I need my hands to be on the steering wheel because the car is so quick. And you can see how quickly I was going through gears. Could you imagine trying to do that in a manual car? Just like, whomp, whomp, whomp. Like, I mean, I guess it would be kind of fun, but also kind of terrifying. I love this road, but we've unfortunately caught a car, so we're gonna have to turn around at some point. But I think you guys get what I'm saying with the PDK thing. Like, everyone's like, oh my God, it's so sacrilegious to have automatic only in the Porsche Turbo, but like, trust me, you don't want a manual in this car. Like, get a GT3 with a manual. I think it makes more sense, but not this car. It's just so beastly. Now, moving on to the suspension. This car is not 100% stock. It has H&R springs on it, and H&R springs, like, H&R is a good company and everything, but personally, I wouldn't touch the suspension. I would leave it as is. But, that's a preference thing. It certainly looks better lowered. Matt likes it lowered, and I mean, it's hard to fault him because it looks pretty cool. But to me, there's not enough suspension travel with the factory shocks on these lowering springs. So with that said, even with the H&Rs, it's still pretty compliant. Excuse me. The only times you have issues is like when you bottom out on bump stops or whatever. But otherwise, like the damping coupled with the springs, it's totally fine. I gotta be honest, I don't notice a huge difference when I hit the sport button as a sport suspension button. I notice it more, it is a little bit noticeable, but I notice it more in the corners. The car seems to handle a little bit flatter with that suspension on. And that flatness is certainly welcomed when you're pushing it on some fun, twisty roads. So the suspension is super compliant, and I mean, the car just has so much grip. Like, granted, this car is on Cup 2s, but I'm certain that with any quality tire, you're gonna have way more grip than you need because it's all-wheel drive. Like, keep in mind, the turbos are all-wheel drive because in order to make this amount of power with this amount of torque, about 490 pound-feet of torque, you need all-wheel drive. Otherwise, it just ain't gonna work. Let's get it a little bit here. Speaking of brakes, go down to first here. Love the PDK because it'll do whatever the hell you tell it to do. So as I get heavy on the brakes there, so perfect. Everything you would expect from Porsche. And I don't want to take that for granted because for so long we loved BMWs, the 3 Series and stuff like that because they were so good, they were so balanced, and like they just seemed to do everything right. And now they don't. Porsche's been doing it right for so long, and we're saying, well, of course their brakes are good because they're Porsche brakes, but they keep doing it right, so I can't really fault them for that. You know, if you're going to do track work, sure, get the ceramics, but these brakes are really good on the street. Once again, a little debris on this road, so I'm going to be ginger. Now, this is a smaller road, of course, and while the 911 has got a little bit bigger, let's talk about the difference between the 991 and the 997 that, you know, the 991 replaced the 997. So, is it too big? Doesn't feel too big even on this road, in my opinion. I mean, it feels a little bit bigger, but it's not like it's not my Mustang GT 350. That car on this road was just, it filled up everything. There wasn't any room to play around. This is about the absolute limit of size that I would want to deal with for a, you know, a purpose-built sports car, of course. So I think the size, you do get some advantages with the size. So you get the longer wheelbase with the 991 over the 997, which of course makes the thing overall bigger, but it rides better too. Like, this rides way better than my 997 did. So you inherently get that kind of stuff. And while we're on the topic of things that are better in this car than my 997, gosh, this car is so fast. What is better? Oh, the interior. Okay, so my biggest complaint on my 997 was, if you get in that car, or if you take someone who doesn't know anything about like brands, just blindfold them, put them in the car, and they didn't see any icons like logos or anything on the steering wheel, I don't think they would guess that that car was a Porsche. Porsche, to me, should exhibit luxury and a solidness. German cars have a certain solidity to them, and my 997 simply did not have that. We're gonna turn around once again because that road's really fun. My 997 did not have that, but the 991 does. Like, they have totally brought back the goodness of quality materials. Everything looks nice, it feels nice. The tactile buttons, they feel like they're gonna last. They feel of higher quality. I felt honestly like I was in a Toyota sometimes in my 997. And like, it's a common problem with 997s that the printing on the buttons wears off. It's like, I'm in a friggin' Porsche, man. This is unacceptable. So we'll take a minute and I'll pan and show you guys kind of the center stack. It feels quality. The steering wheel feels quality. Everything you touch feels quality. And of course, it's $150,000. It damn well better. But these paddles are really nice as well. I don't know what they're made out of, maybe like aluminum or something, but they're really solid and they give you just a nice tactile feel. But when I press these buttons down here, even just for like the sport button or for the nose lift or for, you know, the auto start stop, like, everything feels nice. And that's really where I would feel so much more comfortable spending the extra money on this car, is because it feels worth it. Like, outside of just being redunculously fast, it feels premium and it feels German. In many ways, it's like this weird hodgepodge car where it's a mix between my Evo 9, and my BMW M3. So you get the unbelievably quick and response and super speed of the Evo, and it's so easy to drive because it's all-wheel drive. So you get that. But then on the other hand, you get like the solidity of a German car, the premiumness. You know, German cars just handle speed so well on the highway. If there is a fault that I can give this car, which are very few and far between, one of them is it is so unbelievably difficult to drive this car slowly, to obey speed limits, especially on the highway. This car is, of course, made for the Autobahn, right? So when I'm going 75 miles an hour, I can legitimately say, look at this turning radius. This is absurd. I cannot do this in any other car. So when I'm going 75 miles an hour, I legitimately feel like I can double the speed, or I could go double, like I could go $150 and I would be totally fine. Like that's the kind of confidence this car gives you. And a lot of German cars do that, but this one is just even more so. So while we're on the topic of any other qualms I have with the car, guys, I've poured over the car. I've driven it for 2 days, a couple hundred miles, and I'm having a hard time thinking like, okay, what don't I like? So if I'm going to be critical, the exhaust note is not that great. But there's a caveat to that. So the exhaust note is not that great. From outside the car, it's just kind of like the whole thing whooshes by, and it sounds of efficiency. And efficiency is good, don't get me wrong, but there's not a lot of theater to it. It doesn't rev super high, but you know, it's a turbocharged engine. They typically don't. But I will say the caveat with that is I've been pleasantly surprised because I knew it wasn't going to sound great. Like, I know what a Porsche turbo sounds like. But from inside the cabin, let me shut up here for a second, see if you can hear it. There's a lot of turbo noises going on. There's a lot of like diverter valve. There's a lot of whooshing. So I do really appreciate that. If your car isn't going to have or make good exhaust noises, it might as well make other good noises. So the only other thing, as we go, we're gonna like totally blitz on this highway, but the only other thing that I can really say is that one of the things I really liked about my 997 is that it felt very rear engine. And like, rear engine's kind of a flawed design, but there are some endearing qualities about it. And like, you kind of flick the weight around and it makes it fun. And what's cool about it is that it's a different experience, right? Good Lord. Big number. Okay. So anyways, going back to the whole rear engine thing, this car is of course rear engine, but it doesn't feel like it. Like, they're sorting everything out with the all-wheel drive, and I guess Porsche's just gotten better, and I think probably making the wheelbase longer has helped that as well. So it's hard to say I'm knocking the car for being better. Like, it feels like less of a death trap, but there is a certain charm and quality to the rear engine Porsches. The noise is still behind me and everything, but it doesn't really feel like it. It feels more mid-engine to me because it's so well balanced. Now granted, it might feel different on the racetrack if you're going 10/10s, but guys, I can't obviously do anywhere near that level on the street. So that's basically where it is. In summary, the 991 Turbo is everything I wanted it to be and more. And I think what impresses me most is that it's the most complete car I've ever driven. Like, some cars do luxury well, some cars do speed well, some cars do theater well, but it's so hard to find a car that just does absolutely everything. And while like I said, there are some things that it's not like quite amazing on the theater aspect, it's good enough with the turbo noises and it's fun. But like, you could legitimately just daily drive this absolute beast of a car. PDK works great in automatic. The car does so well on the highway. It's not too stiff, so I'm not like screwed over comfort-wise from the suspension or anything like that. So it's so complete, but then I can go rip a back road. I can go rip this highway, which I'm totally about to do whenever this light turns green. And hopefully there's no police around, because this is not my car, and that's a hard explanation. Oh my God. I can't think of a better way to end the video than a just ridiculous highway pull in the 991 Turbo, because if you have the money, like, it's hard to say that a car is of good value when it's 90, you know, you can find these with more miles on them for like 90 grand, maybe closer to 100 for a really nice one. So it's hard to say that's a value, but like, when you consider everything this thing does, it's just remarkable. And you know, are you guys in the market for an E92 M3? Because now mine's for sale. So that should tell you everything you need to know. I appreciate you guys watching as always. Thank you so much to Matt for letting me borrow this wonderful car. If you want to follow me in between episodes and see what I'm up to, what's on future episodes, check me out on Instagram at Eat Sleep Drive TV. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.